Hello everyone, welcome back to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and today I'm going to be learning with you about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends. In today's case, it is definitely going to be a friend of the furry variety, one that I'm super excited to get into, which is the oh so wonderful honey badger. So this is a special listener episode dedicated to Jordan's dad, Dean. So Dean, if you're listening out there, you are awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. And Jordan, thank you for writing into the podcast. And thank you to all of you listeners out there that make this podcast A, so enjoyable, and B, just, without you guys, I wouldn't have anything to talk about here. I wouldn't have any suggestions, and, I'd be left to my own devices. So I very much like that everyone writes into the show. We have so many people writing in, new listeners, old listeners that have been with the podcast for, we're coming up on about a year, or we might have actually passed a year of the podcast, a year anniversary. So I'm very happy that I have so many of you writing into the show. So thank you. It wouldn't be possible without you, Dean and Jordan. So today's episode is chock full of good facts about these little guys. The honey badger is I'm sure many of us have heard of it before. It had a period of time in social media where it was regarded as this thing that just didn't care. And the honey badger doesn't care. The honey badger does whatever it likes. And it was a very popular thing in the media for a while. I think this was maybe 2013, 2014, something like that. I'm totally making a guess here, but the honey badger is something that I have no experience with pretty much. I don't know much about it other than the fact that people say they don't care. And we'll see if they really don't care. Do honey badgers really care? That's the question we're here to answer today. So before we get into the podcast, I'm just going to say a few announcements again. So one, our merch store is open now for the Relax with Animal Facts podcast. You can go to relaxwithanimalfacts.com. There you can find the store, you can find the Instagram, you can find the YouTube where I am currently recording myself. So if you want to see Steph Wolf on video form, you could always go to the YouTube channel by visiting the website. And I look forward to seeing you all there, and maybe on the store, whatever you guys like to do. I did my best to make the designs as simplistic as possible, and as I personally think they look great. And so soon I'm gonna be getting a few samples. So if you'd like to see on the podcast, if you'd like to see what it actually looks like in person, you can watch on YouTube a little bit later when I actually get the stuff. So enough dilly-dallying here. Let's get straight into the podcast episode. So today's episode, I got my facts from mentalfloss.com and nationalgeographic.com. Mental Floss I've used time and time again on the show. They're a pretty reliable source. And of course, National Geographic, I'm always going to trust what they have to say. Sometimes I'll be a little bit skeptical, but for the most part, it just, it's smooth sailing with them. So why don't we just get right into the show? So honey badgers, also known as rattels, I hope I'm saying that right, are related to skunks, otters, ferrets, and other badgers. Now, these voracious omnivores get their name from their fondness for feeding on honey and honeybee larvae. They also eat insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, as well as roots, bulbs, berries, and fruits. Now, when it's referring to bulbs, it is of course not referring to light bulbs, because you wouldn't really know, because apparently these guys just don't care. Now, I'm seeing maybe why people are saying they don't care is because they feed on the honey and honeybee larvae. So, of course, they're going to risk getting stung and stuff like that, but a lot of these animals that come in contact with these things on a regular basis build up a sort of immunity, a sort of adaptation to these sorts of things. There's certain kinds of, I believe it is a different kind of badger or a ferret of some kind that is able to withstand venom from a snake that it most oftentimes goes for, in the wild. So it's really cool to see how these animals are adapted almost perfectly for their environment. And though they hunt for their own food most of the time, they'll happily steal from other carnivores or scavenge the kills of bigger animals when the opportunity arises. So for the most part, they are predatory, they hunt, but they will also scavenge. So they are, sometimes scavengers, sometimes predators, as opposed to other animals that are strictly scavengers. For example, vultures, right? Vultures aren't going to be hunting on their own. They're going to wait for something to be already deceased and then have their meal. But in the case of the honey badger, they do everything, I suppose. And their prominent sharp teeth, long foreclaws referring to their front two paws there. I don't know if that's the right word, front two arms, I suppose I could say. And their stocky build will allow them to easily rip meat from bone. So here they're going to have a very tough jaw. They're going to have tough teeth as well to be able to perform these things. Sort of contrasting it to the hyena episode, I always like to go back and forth with this. In the hyena episode, we learned that the teeth of the hyena are very strong, and the amount of pressure that the hyenas are able to make with their jaws, enough to break bone, to really break bone with their jaws, is incredible. So here we see animals that don't necessarily have as strong a jaw, but strong enough to be able to just rip meat from bone fairly easily, not necessarily bite straight into bone like hyenas do. And the honey badgers can be found throughout most of sub-Saharan Africa, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Western Asia. So fairly, I would say fairly localized. They're not found all around the world like some of the animals that we've covered, with the exception of areas such as Antarctica and stuff like that. But they can adapt to a variety of conditions, from warm rainforests to cool mountains, and their home ranges can be as vast as 193 square miles or 500 square kilometers. So these home ranges are basically where they live, their territory kind of thing. So we've seen in also the koala episode a long time, this must have been a long time ago, where the koalas also have home ranges, but they have these little home ranges that are more sort of that are less in range, I suppose, and each little home range is where there's a singular male koala sort of. It's their territory, basically. So in the case of honey badgers, I'm not so sure if their home ranges, these seem like more solitary animals. Again, just a quick reminder for anyone that's maybe new to the podcast, I am in no way an animal biologist. I am just I'm just a guy that loves to learn about animal facts. So when I say I'm learning with you, I am truly learning with you, and I'm making speculation and these sorts of things of how I get to know these animals, I suppose. So I hope you guys enjoy that. And I'm trying to work. I got an email actually that said, P.S. keep all those ums. Keep all those ums in the podcast. So it's what makes you. I'm working on it. I'm trying not to say as much, but it is very, very difficult for me to do that. So if I say too much, I apologize. I am working on it, so don't you worry. So although honey badgers are widespread and considered abundant, they are hunted or persecuted in certain regions, especially when they come into contact with or conflict with farmers and beekeepers. So of course beekeepers and farmers are going to have a tough time with these little guys. And they are also eaten as bushmeat and harvested for traditional medicine trade. A reputation for bravery and tenacity make honey badgers popular for traditional medicine. So this happens fairly often in certain communities where, for example, a tiger is powerful. So maybe getting something from the tiger will make you more powerful as a human being. Now, this sort of science is not oftentimes backed by any true fact, but it's just a matter of tradition and things like that, which is not so good, especially for animals, a lot of exotic animals. So they are skunk-like. So aside from their physical similarities, the honey badger also boasts a dangerous gland at the base of its tail containing a really stinky liquid. And generally it is used to mark territory, but should the animal find itself in distress, its biological knee-jerk is to release basically a stink bomb, different but just as rotten as its sister scent lever. So it is not exactly like a skunk, but it will indeed leave a scent that is not very pleasant. This little stink bomb here is, of course, an adaptive trait, something that happens very common among animals that have to use certain mechanisms to get away. For example, with squids or not with squids, with the octopus, with the ink that they sort of propel outwards. I don't know if every single octopus species does that, but you'll see it in a lot of species that use anything. So basically, releasing the stink bomb is its way of saying, all right, leave me alone. This is enough. If you eat me, I might taste as bad as I smell. So that is a very good mechanism. That is definitely an adaptive trait. So it serves a dual purpose. One, to mark its territory. Marking territory with smell is a very, very common trait among many animals. And second, it is used as a defense mechanism. So that's fantastic for the honey badger. They can dig like crazy, as it's written here. Using their long claws, honey badgers dig burrows to rest in, sometimes on a daily basis. They'll do it anywhere in the ground, in a tree trunk, or even into an old termite mound. And if needed, they can dig themselves a hiding hole in a matter of minutes and use their natural excavation skills to capture prey underground. So they are really, really versatile predators. They don't just hunt just on land, they can even hunt underground in this sort of way. So they have these natural excavation skills in which they can use to really dig and to catch prey. So that is absolutely amazing. But they are pretty lazy about their housekeeping. Unlike myself here, if you're watching the YouTube video, I do make my bed in the morning. The honey badgers do not make their beds in the morning. They're in no mood to do that. It is not shy about making itself at home in someone else's residence. So honey badgers, they really don't care. They're okay with being sort of rude and intrusive on someone else's residence. And the creatures have been known to get comfortable in the dens of aardvarks, which are anteaters, or in the tunnels of foxes, mongooses, or spring hares. Now that just reminded me, mongooses. I believe that many mongooses have, or all mongooses have, a sort of adaptation to certain kinds of snake venom that because they do hunt snakes and these snakes are venomous, they develop an immunity to it. So that's what I was trying to say before. It was not a ferret, but indeed a mongoose, if you guys remember what I was talking about. And really any crevice or hole will do for the honey badger. They're really good at adapting, as we learned earlier, and the animals are usually diurnal in winter, but where they need to avoid humans, they are usually nocturnal. So diurnal, meaning that they're awake during the day, sleep at night, just like us, well, some of us. And then in the cases in which they need to be careful of other predators, in this case humans, most of the time, they will be nocturnal, meaning that they are awake at night, asleep during the day, so working the night shift there. So it is not just the honey badger that likes to make a home in someone else's home. This is a very common thing in nature, because why expend the energy to make your own home when you can just go and steal another? Very, very common. It happens with food. It happens with sort of their residency, I guess you could say, where they're living. So this isn't just exclusive to the honey badger. And here it's written that they're mean. It is true that the honey badger has the Guinness Book of World Records title of the most fearless creature, but they're more than just audacious. They're downright mean. They're invasive and eager to pick a fight, even with a porcupine. Wow. So now I'm really starting to see why it's, why that meme of honey badgers just don't care, where it comes from. But that doesn't mean they're invincible, just because hyenas, lions, leopards, and pythons are all foes, as are humans, of course. But if those are considered your only enemies, you're probably incredibly tough, as it's written here. So that is just simply amazing that they don't eat. They don't even care if it's a porcupine. Porcupine, as many of you know, have quills that are not very. You don't want that in your face. You don't want that where you eat. So the fact that they will pick a fight even with something as defensively masterful as a porcupine just shows how confident these guys really are in their predatory skills, or in their fighting skills, I guess you could say. So they are very thick-skinned. There are reports of arrows and spears glancing off their thick, rubbery epidermis just meaning the very outer layer of skin, which is also loose enough that should a honey badger get caught in the mouth of a predator, it can writhe around and even break loose. A second option is to retaliate using its very powerful teeth, and the honey badger may even have a resistance to snake venom and is sometimes able to sleep off a bite. So there we go. There's that snake venom thing I was actually referring to earlier. And their thick skin comes in handy in this way as well, where snakes compose a quarter of their diets. So having a somewhat decent resistance to snake venom can be a very, very big advantage for the honey badger. And here we have just a testament to how powerful their teeth are. So they can chomp down with enough force to break the shell of a tortoise. Now, that is crazy talk here. So breaking the shell of a tortoise, the shell of a tortoise is indeed very, very tough. And for good reason, because it's one of the main defense mechanisms of these guys. So the fact that they can break through it shows it's a true testament to their power there. And they don't actually partner up with birds to find food. So this has been a sort of a incorrect interpretation of things. So you might have heard that honey badgers and honey guide birds have a good partnership going. The honey guide leads the badger to the hive and then eats up after the honey badger destroys it. Well, after close to 200 years of study, we can pretty definitively say that honey badgers don't care. This behavior has never been reliably seen in the wild, and even playing honey guide songs elicits no response. So that is really funny. So sometimes when you see in media sources, or you see a sort of maybe even a common thing among an animal, that's why I say it is absolutely good to be skeptical about these things that you hear and that you read, even from sources as big as National Geographic, because questioning those things is going to get you to a better understanding. It might lead you to research more into it and get a better understanding in general. So they are pretty solitary. So they're in the same family as weasels, and just like those prickly beasts, honey badgers are pretty solitary. They keep to themselves and definitely stay out of the public eye as much as they can, because they understand, of course, that humans are not so good for them, and they will usually only band together to mate. So a very common thing. We saw that in koalas. We saw that in a large amount of animals that we've covered on the podcast already. Babies, of course, are the exception. Young kits, which they are called. So baby honey badgers are called kits. They will often stick with their mothers for so long that they can even outgrow her, which is, wow, that is not very common for sure, at least not among many of these, of the weasel family, or in many other animals that we've covered. It's common in primates and stuff like that to stay with the mothers for years and years, up to 8 years, I believe, in the orangutan or the bonobo. But in the cases of many of these other animals, it's not that common. So they're so intelligent that they even use tools. Now, tools being used by animals shows truly the length of their intelligence. Now, tool using has been seen among animals such as primates, elephants, birds as well. Certain birds like crows and ravens and stuff like that, they're incredibly smart for their size of the brain. So using tools, using your environment to your advantage is something that shows a true intelligence marker. Now, tool using was a stepping stone in human evolutionary history. The Homo habilis, for example, was the first sort of species of human that was seen to be a skillful user of its environment. So very, very important there. And video from wow, that is just made to mess me up. Video from Moholoholo Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in South Africa. What a name. It revealed that a team of honey badgers will use sticks, a rake, mud, stones, and pure determination in their attempts to escape. You can watch this and all of Honey Badger's Masters of Mayhem on YouTube. If the Planet of the Apes franchise ever loses steam, it seems like we might have another animal to suggest for a spin-off. Very funny mental floss. But nonetheless, it doesn't take away from the fact that they can use all of these tools to escape. I have actually seen the video that they are talking about. I just remembered now. And it is very, very funny how they are able to do these things. So I would say definitely go check it out. For the final fact of the episode, we're going to be talking about the name. Where does the name come from? What does it mean? So their name means honey eater of the Cape. So Mellivora capensis is the species' formal name, but you can go ahead and judge a honey badger by its common name. These little monsters love the sweet stuff. And the Cape is the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa, where many of them reside. They also call the Middle East and India home. So another one of their names is Ratel, as we learned earlier, which is an Afrikaans word that might be derived from the Dutch word for honeycomb, rat, R-A-A-T. So that is the name of the that is the last fact, the name. So thank you all so very much for tuning in. Make sure to follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube for those of you that want to see Steph Wolf, I guess you could say in person. So thank you all so very much for tuning in. Make sure to follow the Instagram, follow on Spotify if you are watching or listening rather on Apple Podcasts or anywhere where you can rate the podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star review. I'm going to be reading them on the podcast whenever they come up. So thank you all so very much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.